Are we live?
Yes, we are. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wrestling with Reality podcast. I am your host, Eric Malikian, alongside my co-host, Kris Kloss. How you doing?
But not tonight. I get to sit back, and I get to relax tonight on the Wrestling with Reality podcast.
You definitely do. I figured, you've had a long storied career. You're going on 25, 26 plus years now in the professional wrestling industry. So I thought this would be a perfect opportunity for us just to kind of go over memory lane throughout the years up to now. And I know there's quite a few things you've done in this industry that a lot of people don't even know about. So hopefully they'll enjoy this podcast today.
Great. It's when you and the producer, according to Woods, came up with this idea to take the co-host and put him in the guest slot, I was all for it. Again, like I say, a night off. And, good to be, by the way, before we get into like you interviewing me, it's been a pleasure to work with you, work with Adam and all the guests we've had. And so with this podcast, I'm excited for it. We're going to have a lot more guests from the world of professional wrestling throughout the different eras in this industry. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And Kris, I'd like to thank you so much. It's truly an honor to have you on as a co-host, and you're a great friend. And let's rock and roll if you're ready to go.
Let's rock and roll. Woo!
Yeah. So Kris, tell us a little bit about your background. How did you discover professional wrestling? And from there, how over the years did you slowly break into it?
Well, my background, there's a clock, a lamp, a lava lamp. These are 4 cowboys here. Got some books, some reading. There's my my college diploma, which I'm proud of. Oh, background. Oh, shit. Maybe this isn't going to be an easy night here. Wow, I've already 0 for 1.
Hey, we could take this any way you want to go. So
yeah, you got it. No, but in all seriousness, my background, I'm SoCal native. My mother's family is she was raised in Southern California. My dad is from Washington State. So I have family in both those regions of the country and in Minnesota too. So all my life I kind of spent my summers up there. Grew up up there in the summers, and but SoCal native. My initial part of my life was in like Mar Vista, Venice, Santa Monica area, and then when I was in elementary school, I moved to the San Fernando Valley, which I still live today. I didn't always live there though. Lived in San Diego, lived in New York, and now I'm living about a couple miles away from the house I grew up in, and but yeah, when I was culture shock when I moved out to the valley, it was like Little House on the Prairie. It was very whitewashed, and I grew up in the Venice area when I was up to about 3rd grade, and so I had that kind of like reality of culture growing up with up to that point. So I felt like I was a little bit more, I don't want to say evolved, but a little more culturally wise than, like, let's say the kids in the West Valley, right? So anyway, was there, and then it was at about the mid late 80s, pretty much all of us from this era when we got into wrestling. And then it wasn't until like the late 80s where it's like, whoa, I something more than just the love of wrestling, like every other kid in school. Something else like kind of zapped me into becoming fascinated with the industry and just in love with it. And so that happened probably in around middle school when all the other kids were starting to grow out of it. I was growing more into it, So it's like you think you're the weird one a little bit, but who cares? It was just the greatest world, pro wrestling. And so that was the beginning days of me getting into this business. my life in wrestling have kind of wrestling and then other things in my life, wrestling and other things in my life have happened throughout my wrestling career. You know, I gave it up, moved to New York, became an actor on a Broadway show, um, um, got into charity auctions and to nonprofit work, which I'm doing now, and kind of back into wrestling and this, and then opportunities would come up. But I mean, before I fast forward into that, yeah, I was in the biz. I was wanting to get into this business one way or the other, and then kind of started with a fellow that we know with by the name of Dynamite D. Kind of really that was like the beginning of me putting a foot into this business, finding out how I could do that with his cable radio show called Wrestle Talk, a call-in show, completely kayfabed. It's a kayfabe show. It wasn't like you're calling Dave Meltzer, you know, you're calling Mean Gene Okerlund, you know, and so that's how Dynamite D treated the show, and it was a blast. And it was at a time where people were starting to become wise to it, but wow, this guy is still keeping kayfabe, you know, and then he was involved with a place called Slammers Wrestling Gym. I don't want to get too far ahead of your questions here, but you asked about my background, raised in Southern California, and got into the love of the business probably around junior high-ish. The true love where I wanted to be a part of the business, junior high.
No, that's perfect. And I think for a lot of us, I would say probably around middle school or so is, you know, maybe even, you know, the beginning of high school, you start thinking, you know what? Been a fan for so long. Maybe there's something to this and maybe I want to be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And again, when you notice yourself gravitating more to the business while everybody, your peers around you are growing away from it, you know something is happening. You're not just going along with the crowd in third or fourth grade or fifth grade while we're all doing the same thing. We were, and then I'm sure I could speak for you too. Most all of us in the business, you know, we're all in the same place liking wrestling. Elementary, junior high, you start liking it more, they start liking it less. Then in high school nobody likes it and you just love this. It's like, wait, what's going on here, you know? But if you get it, you get it.
Well, and you know what? We grew up in slightly different eras. You know, I know you kind of were in high school when wrestling was kind of tapering off past the 80s boom, the rock and roll wrestling era.
Yeah.
For me, when I was in middle school and high school, wrestling was at a fever pitch. So for you to still be in it through all these years shows your true dedication to the business and how you just really, really gravitated towards it.
You know, that's actually funny. Some of the like I was known as, oh, Kris, the WWF kid, you know, like a lot of us were in high school, right? But I remember a few years after high school when, like, I graduated in 94. And so, yeah, you know, folks, when I graduated, it was in the tank, right? And and so it was like, whoa, I was like the starch defender of this industry. Not only were my peers growing out of it naturally, organically, but the industry was also getting more cartoony, more ridiculous. And so it was a struggle. And then I remember a few years after high school when boom, the Attitude Era, NWO and all that exploded. It's like, whoa, Kris, your wrestling, couple people from my peers, your wrestling is exploding. I'm like, what do you mean your wrestling? And this one guy was like, dude, you're the one that's been defending this. I'm like, oh, okay. You know, like one guy saw that, you know, or said it at least. But yeah, it was a tough, because you graduated, I want to say the early, like, 2000, 2001, right?
2001.
Okay. So yeah, you were from basically pretty much your high school years was at the high point.
Oh, it was huge. It was huge. Everyone was wearing NWO shirts, DX shirts, Austin shirts. It was just something you saw on a daily basis.
So like your junior high, middle school years were more like my high school years then. Your kids were into it more naturally at that age, but it wasn't anything to write home about at that time, for the general public at least.
Yes, no, you're very
Yeah.
right. And you graduating in 94 is probably when wrestling was kind of at its lowest.
Right. Right. Even the year before, I remember I was like, "Hey guys, let's go. Let's do this. Let's go to Vegas. Let's go to Vegas. Let's go WrestleMania 9." And I mean, at the time, I got one of my friends, Matt Dool, from church friend from not even in the Valley in Santa Monica. We went, not by ourselves. We're only in a 10th and 11th grade, family trip kind of thing. But um, it was, I just looking back, it was like no one even cared really. Like, yeah, WrestleMania, 9 in Vegas. Yeah, I don't know. It's like I'm thinking, dude, this is awesome. Vegas, Caesar's Palace, it's Vegas, WrestleMania. And I remember it was like no one really cared all that much. And generally, your wrestling people, like you, like the people we met in this business, we were like the few ones sporadically that cared. But the general classes didn't care at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you couldn't tell us any different that wrestling was at a low point. We loved it with a fever pitch and continued loving it throughout the years, where, like you said, it was kind of a rough patch for the general public
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
far as their interest.
Yeah, 100.
Well, you know what? Let's talk a bit about what led you into the business. Let's talk about Slammers Wrestling Gym and Slammers Wrestling Federation. How did you find out about them, and tell us about attending their shows back in the early 90s?
So yeah, again, I probably started listening to Wrestle Talk maybe early 91, somewhere around there, mid 91. And Dynamite D was the host. He was the cable radio network host as well as Slammer's wrestler. Um so of course he promoted the Slammer shows on his radio show. That's how a lot of us found out about this. That's how a lot of the guys who ended up in Southern California indie wrestling, which it really wasn't officially known as yet at that time, but we kind of found out about it. So of course, ventured to Slammers, this little oasis in the middle of the valley that didn't belong there, kind of thing, like a mirage in the middle of a desert. It was an old car garage morphed into a wrestling arena. Arena meaning one row of seats around the ring in the garage, and where the office was the lobby, and it was the who's who. You had about, I would say, 100 to 200 8x10 pictures lining the whole wall. It wasn't that big of an office, but every inch was covered. And back in those days, if there was a place like Slammers in the world of wrestling, people in the industry like your Jim Cornettes, I'm going to name just random names, your Lenny Poffos, your Mike Sharps, Bobby Heenans, would all have their 8x10s in there, and they'd all have them signed. And they paid their respects to a place like Slammers Wrestling Gym. Nowadays, a little different. Places like this are kind of everywhere. Indies are dime a dozen, da da da. And then the business has changed so much too. Like we have to not, as far as the business mind, hey, we're our league. Let's that anything else is competition kind of thing now. So you didn't really have that. It was still the Wild West in many ways, the wrestling business. And so there was a lot of admiration for that place for people in the know, right? So like when WCW or WWF would come to LA, a lot of times a lot of those guys would venture out to Sun Valley in the San Fernando Valley and check out Slammers and say hello and give them their 8x10. So it's a very interesting place. It was kind of like an Italian, real fancy New York, LA Italian restaurant or Jewish deli with all the celebrity pictures up on the walls. And that's really kind of how that it was treated, but for the world of pro wrestling. And very cool. I mean, especially that young to find a place like this. And then you're watching them keep kayfabe. It's like, man. And so I would go to shows. I got to know them a little bit, not so much in the early days because I was still young, 10th grade or whatever. And wasn't until um like 94 when I graduated, 95, that I started talking to them about doing some announcing. and Vern Langdon was the head of Slammers. Well, right when that was kind of happening, there was a rift between Dynamite D and Vern Langdon, so they kind of broke apart. Dynamite D did a legitimate NWO angle called the D Dynamite World Order, DWO. So at that time there was friction. I was more talking to Dynamite than I was Vern, and so when that happened, I was kind of didn't know where my place was. And then when I found out that Dynamite, Patrick Hernandez, Kevin Kleinrock, who were with Slammers, they were doing their own thing called SCCW, Southern California Championship Wrestling. Then I reconnected with them, told them like, hey, I want to do this. You know, I know you guys aren't with Slammers anymore, but I want to do the ring announcing. So so they said, okay, you got it. But they meant you got it, your ring crew. so it was all about setting up the rings if I wanted to ring announce, you know, flyering and all that. And that was a great learning experience. That was a great growing experience because I was a young guy at the time. And it was just another life lesson into, you know, you got to work for what you have and you got to appreciate what you have. It doesn't just, this is not just given to anybody. Yeah, you may have we like your talent, which I was thankful for. They liked my talent, but it still is a privilege. So the business still operated that way, where it was telling young guys, this isn't something you just get. You really have to know that this is a complete privilege to be able to do this. So I learned that very early on, and I appreciated that. You know, especially the nights of the ring crew, and then you know we're loading it and unloading it when the sun's starting to come up and the U-Haul trucks. You know, it was work, you know, but it was like, man, it was like you were like excited for your work because you knew your work, what you were putting in work to do what you wanted to do. I mean, I can't stress how important that is for a young person, you know, just to work for what you want and what you love in life.
Yeah, you got to pay your dues no matter
Yeah.
whether it's professional wrestling, you know, going through college like you did, or, you know, starting a new job at a bank.
You're right. Exactly. And yeah, and then all those guys were just great. The late great Patrick Hernandez, who we want to wish well, and of course Kevin Kleinrock. You know, we'll wish all of them well.
Let me ask you this. So once you started working ring crew, and this was kind of at a time where there was still a little bit of kayfabe, it just wasn't, you could walk off the street, call a phone number, and you're either in wrestling school or you're a part of a wrestling promotion. How did the wrestlers generally treat you before you started ring announcing?
Um, I never had any problems um early on, you know, at all really. I think when you get into a place, you're always gonna get a couple guys that don't get along, or you're gonna see one guy that kind of doesn't get along with anybody, and those guys are probably gonna be your hurdle. So when I first started, I didn't really have any issue. Um, no one remember now when officially started, Slammers was broken up, SECW was here. Then there was another league called UIWA. We're not even talking about Gary Key's IWF now at this point, but the UIWA and SECW, they would kind of be an SECW show, but there'd kind of be UIWA guys here and there. There'd be a UIWA show, there'd be like SECW guys here and there. So there was a lot of like, okay, who's this guy? Yeah, I've heard of him kind of thing. So everybody was kind of behaving, let's say, for the most part. So I never really had any issues. Also, too, keep in mind that everybody saw the guys that were paying their dues, like you're saying before. If you are seeing somebody that's getting there early, you are doing the grunt work. You're not just there to do my thing and leave. If the guys, for the most part, that are fair-minded guys that aren't the a-holes that stick out just to be a-holes, if all those guys see that, you're most, at least back then, you pretty much weren't going to have any issues. You know what I mean? The guys kind of watched out for the business, watched out for each other, and watching out for the business meant if somebody comes in here and they're not paying their dues, we're gonna kind of take notice, and that was protecting the business, the league, everything. So if you came in there, I think the best deterrent for having issues with guys was to come in there and let it be known that you're paying your dues. Yes, sir. What can I do here to help out? All that. Uh, Priority one, and then your performance is priority two. Believe it or not, that's kind of how it worked. Like you would think priority one is my performance in the ring as an announcer, whatever, but really priority one was showing that you respected everybody, that you were paying your dues. That kind of was the number one priority. We get into XPW later with television and all that. A little bit does have to change with that, but I'll save that till later.
How long were you on ring crew before you started ring announcing for SCCW?
Oh, well, I mean, when I was ring announcing, I was still ring crew.
Oh.
Yeah. And yeah, I kind of I was like thought I was graduating from that. Okay, we're gonna have you ring announce now. Oh, awesome. Okay, remember, got to be here to set the ring up. Wait, what? Oh shit, this is how it works, because everyone had to pitch in. We didn't have a crew that came and did it. You know what I mean? We were the crew. We didn't, there was no budget to hire a crew to come in. Came later, again, XPW days, not even the original XPW days, later on XPW.
Tell us about your first event that you ring announced. And prior to you ring announcing, did anybody give you any tips of the trade before you went out there about how to present yourself?
I remember having a lot to learn. I remember it was Patrick Hernandez. I did the Howard Finkel impersonation, ladies and gentlemen, and he loved it. And so I did that for a while. And then after a while, it's like, I got to do my own thing. I just love doing the Fink. It was something I did in school, and everyone said I sounded exactly like him. So I took pride in that, actually, because then I ended up doing voiceover work, so this was just kind of part of that. I can do this stuff, I can impersonate different characters on television. And then when I did it and I sounded exactly like the Fink, people like, oh, this is kind of cool, But again, later on, I had to tweak that so I wasn't, like Perry Caravello, for example. He's that guy in XPW, the Bullhorn Idiot, and he all he does is copy Sam Kinison, and so it's just cringe, So you gotta do your own thing. But anyway, I was doing the ring announcing, and I started at Fountain Valley was my first show at CCW. I want to say the first match I did was American Wild Child versus Super Dragon. That was the first match I announced for that card. And it was off to the races from there. And then so SCCW lasted about a year, until what happened.
Tell us about the big event you were a part of at UCLA, SCCW Slam Fest, and memories working alongside Yokozuna and the Honky Tonk Man.
Yeah, that was like the first, like, wow, I'm working with these WWF guys, And remember, Yokozuna was not that far removed from his WWF career. I mean, he was about 150 pounds heavier, unbelievable. Like, if you can imagine that. But what a nice guy. Honky was cool, but he was more very business, but in awe of a legend like those guys. And just ask Pete Hatfield how in awe it was to be around the Honky Tonk Man, whether in the back or in the ring, in the locker room or the showers or on the ring, or the fans were, all that. But yeah, that was something else. Kevin Kleinrock set that up. He was going to UCLA at the time while I was going to Cal State Northridge. he finished a lot earlier than I did. I dropped out, went back. But anyway, yeah, he set that up, and that was a great venue. The tennis courts that where you see, like, they've done televised tennis on, CBS back in the day there. So it was pretty cool to be there. And that was kind of toward the end, not in the end for like in a bad way, but that was like the calm before the storm. Because right after that, I want to say that might have been our last official show we did for SECW. I don't know if you know the history or offhand, but I want to say that might have been. I could be wrong. Maybe there was one show after that, but I want to say that's the last show we did.
Well, that was the summer '98. I do know that.
So maybe it was, because I don't know. Well, we'll get into like the next step here, and then I'll figure that out, because I think it might have been, because that was exactly 1 year out from the first show of Extreme. And we all had to sign a year's. Yeah, I think it might have been, because we all had to sign 1 year out from the first show, on non-disclosure. We couldn't talk about any of it, or what was to be.
Well, let's jump right into it then. There's a lot of propaganda put out there how XPW started, and people
Right.
that are, head of the promotion on down have a different story about how XPW was formed. You just breaking in the business, still being, a rookie in the industry and everything. How did XPW come about, and what was the process? Because to my understanding, there was like a year-long wait before XPW even officially started.
That's right. It was 1 year, and we actually met at Patrick's house. And this was probably like right after Slam Fest, maybe like a month after. It was still summer, I remember that. And I was delivering pizzas for Numero Uno. And before I went to work, I had to drive out to Sun Valley. We all had the big meeting. We all signed the contract, and then there was barbecue and swimming pool action. And and um, and I remember I told, like, I can do the contract. I got to go. Like, go. Like, yeah, I have to work. I have a shift. Oh, okay. Well, take care. I remember that day as clear as day. And we all signed the contract. It would remember the words Extreme Associates. All this funding from this company will go to finance the wrestling company. We will do shows, and this many times. It was a whole layout, I'm sure put together by Kevin, I'm guessing. And it was kind of exciting and mysterious. And when we had to sign an NDA, we knew that it was a big deal. Like, this is legit. What's going on here? And that was about a year out, because the first show was in July of '99 of XPW. But you asked how did it come about? People have different stories. Pretty simple. Rob Black was, of course, the head of Extreme Associates. Now, the adult entertainment industry, for you youngsters out there that, get it free on the phone, it was a different world back then. It was basically another Hollywood entity. It was a film company, and these companies were making multi-millions of dollars. Just to give you I remember they had the videotapes. They had a ton of blank videotapes that they put the porn movie on. Well, these videotapes literally cost 25 cents once it was packaged, and they sold for $49.95. And they were sending tons of them all across the world, not even just the US, right? So they were making money, right? It was a big business, right?
And $50 went a lot further then than it does now, obviously.
Well, yeah, and think about how much $50 was back then.
Yeah, it was a lot of money.
That's a lot of money, man. And so, and to think about how much that's costing Rob to produce said tape is nothing, But anyway, So we understood right away, like, whoa, we got, okay, so this is going to finance this. Oh my gosh, almost like a WCW kind of thing. Like we have endless income, right? So anyway, going back to like how it started, Rob was a big fan at ECW specifically, but a wrestling fan. And with his money, with his resources, he was working with Paul Heyman for a stint. And you can see him on some old ECW footage, of when supplying girls, ring girls like Jasmine St. Clair, and for ECW events. And anybody that knows Paul Heyman and knows Rob Black, they're just too similar. They're gonna butt heads, and it's not gonna work. And that's what happened. So Rob's like, screw it, I'm gonna start my own thing. Right around that time, there was a house show, WWF, at the Arrowhead Pond, Anaheim, now the Honda Center. And Rob Black, Tom Byron, and whoever else went there. Well, we were all there passing out SCCW flyers. Like we did at every show, whether at the Forum, at the Pond, at the LA Sports Arena, wherever they were at. When the Sports Arena is kind of done at that point with wrestling. But anyway, we were doing that, and Rob got a flyer, called Kevin, and then the rest is history. So that was at the time where he wanted to start his own league. And again, I can't emphasize how much the money came into effect, how big that was for us to have that massive platform.
Absolutely.
But I'll get into what was even more important than that, which was television.
I'm going to ask one question. I don't think anyone's asked you, Kevin Kleinrock, or anyone else this. Did Rob ever come to an SCCW show before he invested in the company?
No, I don't. I don't believe so. That might be a Kevin question. Yeah, that might be a Kevin question. I don't think so. I don't think so.
So that's crazy. Someone invests all this money and resources into, partnering up with this company, and he's never even seen a show live.
Maybe not live, but I know he's probably seen footage. And I think it was more talking to Kevin, Pat, and Dee, talking to these guys more so than let me see your ring, let me see your wrestlers. It's like, okay, do these guys have at least some semblance of a business model that I can work with? And I mean, all three of those guys were so valuable, Kevin, Patrick, and Dee, like completely. And so I think that was more important to Rob than anything else. You can find talent with his money. You can do whatever, get the ring, get the venue. Once they saw and knew, all right, look, they're starting Kevin, Patrick, Dee. At least they got the wheels rolling. They know enough to do what needs to be done. Yeah.
A year out's a pretty long time. Tell us the timeline throughout the year of when you knew this was officially going to happen.
Okay, so summer of 98, and then the first show was summer of 99. We did the contract. Not much was going on between that time. We couldn't work. We couldn't. I remember I don't think we could do shows. I can't imagine that though now. But I think that was, I couldn't do anything, and which is fine, and not much happened. And then it wasn't until early in the year of 99 that we all met up at the office, at the Extreme offices. Now the wheels were really in motion. So we all didn't really have a guaranteed spot yet, but it was like, hey, let's bring the talent and see what we got. Well, one thing I'll say is Rob was kind of pretty clever, is that when we all first were there, he had these long black gothic jean shorts on with these big boots, and his dreadlocks were all over the place, had a ratty Metallica shirt on, and there was just a bunch of dudes walking through the office. No one had a clue that was the guy. No one had a clue. And I remember I stopped by my folks' house, my mom's, and I told them, and my uncle and sister were there, and my family was in town, I remember. And I'm like, "Oh, hey guys, I'm going to a meeting." And my mom said, "You should put a suit on." And I'm like, "Oh, this is just a meeting for wrestling." And it's like, "No, you ought to do that." And my uncle and my sister, "Yeah, yeah, you ought to do that." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll do that." So I go there. I actually got in a fender bender getting off the freeway that day.
Oh,
Yeah, I got a little fender bender. I remember that. And I was like, and the guy was cool. Nothing really happened. I was like, "I'm going to a meeting." I was like, "Oh man, well, hopefully this will be the beginning of good because you just got your bad gotten rid of." I'm like, "Oh, okay, it's a good way to look at it." So anyway, I go in there. I learned later on that Kevin told me that Rob took Kevin aside and said, "Who's the guy with the suit and tie?" And then Kevin's like, "Oh, well, that's our announcer, Kris Kloss." And oh, okay. So like, wow, that suit and tie thing may have helped me that day. um, but that was the first meeting, and Rob did not let anybody in on who he was until the meeting started. So everybody was like kind of chummy for a good hour in the office. And some guys had their feet up, armchair quarterbacking. And, I think this, and it was like, those guys got weeded out. Rob was doing that deliberately. He wanted to kind of gauge these guys before they knew who he was. And I thought that was very clever. And so anyway, that was probably a few months out from our first show at Reseda Country Club, July 31st.
so tell us, leading into July 31st, 1999, when did you know that you had a spot, and what was your part within the company besides what everyone knows as the ring announcer and host of XPW?
So what happened was I was going in there as the ring announcer, and we had to do a commercial spot. And they said, "Hey, you're going in there and do the commercial so they know you're the play-by-play guy." I'm like, "Play-by-play guy? I'm the ring announcer." Rob's like, "Oh, Kevin, we need to get another ring announcer. Kloss, go in there and do the little bumper." I was like, "Oh." And then they're like, "Yeah, we got this guy Tony T. He's going to do a live broadcast audio." Can you believe that? Audio, right? Back then, XPW website, and it's going to be you and him doing play by play. I'm like, "Oh, I guess I'm the play by play guy now." Right. So that was it. I just got thrown in there. I was already doing the ring announcing, so I had some experience with that. But I will say to everybody else, I apologize for those early days of XPW home video because I cringe when I listen to it. I was green as grass as play by play is concerned. Green as grass. So I became friends with Joey Styles a few years later, and we talked, and we really had a lot of camaraderie and similar paths, right? Well, he had the luxury of, before he really took off with ECW, he had done some work, right, and kind of um, got his feet wet big time. That's the only thing I wish I did a little bit more, so those first few home videos weren't so cringy, as far as I'm concerned. And because I know that I improved quite a bit once television and all the later days of XPW into WXX.
Well, that's pretty impressive because most people that break in the business, whether they're doing color commentary or play by play, usually they're groomed by somebody who's been doing it, for years prior to them. And, they're taught little things. You were basically just, off to the races, on the job training, so to speak.
And that goes back to like what we're talking about, whereas when you were in school, Attitude Era, I was in school, graduated during New Generation time. When we got, I think, like one thing I learned in the business is so many of us are so similar. We're those guys in high school that were picked out and all put together in the business, right? That loved it. And it was just so much practice of fooling around with your friends, of impersonating the guys, at least for me, that it was like I was already practicing that so much growing up. that it was almost like you're self-taught. And that goes back to like, if you get it, you get it, right? If you get the business, you get it. So that helped me quite a bit, and just loving it. I was so happy, like, whoa, I'm in this world. This is awesome. But I still needed that experience. And that when I look back on it, like, ooh, if I only had like a year or two's getting my feet wet, those like hardcore conception, the baptized in blood, like to me, oh, those are so painful to watch. But it's a great memory too, because it's like, wow, that's when I was first starting, you know. But I think those first initial 2 years, if I had been doing not ring announcing, play by play in SCCW, those first XPW footage would have been much different.
Well, in the first XPW video release, you did commentary solo yourself in that, correct?
Yes, I did. And that was one of those uh, kind of reconfirming in the offices. Kloss, get in there. You got to call the matches. Like, wait a minute, are you sure? I don't want to ring announcing. No. We got another ring announcer. You're play by play. Remember? Oh, shoot. Oh, my gosh. That was it. That was my first off to the races, you know?
And if anyone's ever done play-by-play or color commentary, it's hard to do the announcing by yourself when you don't have somebody else to kind of bounce back and forth with.
100%. And I really appreciated that when Rivera came in. At the time, it was a little nerve wracking because, oh, I'm not going to be the showcase guy. This guy coming after my job. But then once we got the groove, it was like, oh, this is great. Because it's like, not only can you bounce off of it, but him and I had this chemistry that we infused this comedic kind of Laurel and Hardy, two out of the Three Stooges back and forth, Gorilla and Bobby Heenan kind of bouncing the ridiculousness and the comedy off of each other. Once we realized that we both were okay with it, we both got it, and we both were. I would say we were both good at it because we had mutual chemistry and camaraderie with each other. I wouldn't have been as good if he wasn't there, and I'd like to think that he wouldn't have been as good as if I wasn't there. And that was like so awesome that it's like, wow, there's two guys here that are cool with each other, and we knew we were funny bouncing off each other because a lot of it was just so organic. You know, there was very little scripting on those bumpers between matches. We had the general what we needed to get over. We had, okay, talk about Jimmy and Messiah, then talk about Angel and Crack, then talk about Shane Douglas and what's going on, and everything in between that. When we're bantering, it was all improv. None of those long-winded back and forth with him and I like dogging each other. None of that was written out, you know, at all. They wouldn't have taken the time to do that. So that was cool. That was very fortunate for both of us that it ended up we were cool with each other, you know.
And you guys did have very good chemistry together. And that brings me to this question. How did XPW TV come about, and how were you and Larry Rivera paired up together for the TV show?
Okay, yeah. And thank you, by the way. So, you know, look, the natural progression, we did our first show, Reseda, California, and it was a buzz. You had Jesse Hernandez, Bill Anderson, and all these, some celebrities came there too. In the porn world, of course, celebrities were there. And it was a big deal. This was 1999. Wrestling was on top. And we were in Los Angeles. That was a big advantage we had. Looking back now in retrospect, if XPW formed out of Oklahoma City or Billings, Montana, it wouldn't have been as big. Let's be real, right? So that was huge. Rob's money was huge. Not only did he have the money, but we had so many advantages. We had cameras, we had cameras that they used that we had access to. We had an edit bay that we didn't have to rent out every time we had a production, whether home video or television. So many advantages if you think about it, right? Built in, right? And so as big as that was, as big as Rob's money was, as big as all these technological and financial advantages, the biggest thing that happened to that league was television. Because when television hit, as big as it already was, that's when everything changed. That's when like we were really in the know now, because we were put on television. It was a 3-hour block. It was ECW at 10, us at 11, and then the WWF B show, Velocity or Jacked, at 12. So we were in that wrestling block. And when we first got on, it was a nationwide syndicate, not everywhere, but pockets of the US on America One. And KGLA was the Los Angeles affiliate, Southern California affiliate of that. That's when everything changed. That's when it was like, oh man, you go to the mall or you go to the gas station and someone recognizes you. It's like, whoa, we knew this was something big was happening. That was the biggest thing. I can't emphasize, television was the biggest thing for that league, because now you're a player in the game. Now you're, and again, Rob's money. If you notice, Rob didn't have any commercials. XPW TV had no commercials. So those were all paid for spots.
Yeah.
It's kind of like Vince McMahon for the longest time didn't have any ads on the ring skirts, the banners. You know what I mean? He paid for all that. And that's what Rob did. He again, financially it was a huge advantage. But I can't emphasize how much television changed everything for all of us.
And having TV in LA was huge at the time, because there was only so many, TV channels, even with cable at that time.
That's such a good point. And I brought that up before, where it's like, as big as TV is today, you got to think you had nobody on YouTube. There was no Netflix. You just had what was on television. And so you are really being seen by eyeballs back then. And it was weekly. Now we got to promote our shows, whether at the LA Sports Arena, and those were other advantages we had. We were in the sports arena. We were at the Grand Olympic Auditorium. But again, I can't emphasize enough, as big as all that was, and Rob's money and all that, and the built-in studios, it was television that was the key.
When did you know, even with TV, that XPW had its place in pro wrestling? When did you kind of figure out, like, wow, this is actually a kind of a big thing?
I would say television was going, and once we hit television in the year early 2000, once we started doing shows at the LA Sports Arena, and you seen the crowds we got, you knew that those crowds were there because of TV. That was it. As we did shows at Reseda, as big as those shows were, you could feel it once TV hit. When you went out to the ring, it was a different vibe once you went out to the ring, pre-TV and post-TV. You could feel it, right? Now these fans are like, oh my gosh, I'm invested in this guy week after week, television. So we kind of all became these characters larger than life, and television did that more than anything. So important. Wrestling is made for TV. It needs to be very important. It really needs to be on television. It's all about television. The 1950s, the boom when TV first hit the scene. Oh my gosh, tailor-made pro wrestling. It was one of the things that pioneered television in general.
Well, one thing I would like to say too, as a wrestling fan at that time, you guys had TV for a good 6 or 7 months when you guys weren't even having wrestling shows. And the fact that you and Larry Rivera were on TV week in, week out, basically waving the flag of the company and doing everything you could to keep the company going at that point.
No, I appreciate it. And those were a little oh man, it was a little frustrating, because we got ousted from the LA Sports Arena, and then there was problems with the Sabu Onita death match that really should have happened. I think the biggest blow to that company's legacy is that not happening. The setup for that and all would have been amazing, but there were some problems for a few months, so we didn't have a venue, and that was it. And so we were on TV talking about nothing. We were talking about Rocco and Jocko kicking a box in the parking lot, talking seriously about topics like this, And so yeah, that was a little frustrating. And you know, we best of matches from the archives were put on or whatever during long stint. But but again, that just shows you how important television is. You're not even showing wrestling, and it's still important that you're kind of like you're building your brand. You're making it a regular mainstay just by being on TV.
I'm going to ask you a tough question right now, just talking about this time frame, because I mean, other people have said this, even people that were opposition of XPW at the time have said that you and Larry Rivera basically kept the company afloat, being on TV week in, week out. Did Rob ever truly appreciate what you guys brought to the table and how the chemistry you guys had led that into the beginning of 2001 when you guys were packing Birmingham High School in the San Fernando Valley?
You know, that's a question you'd have to ask Rob Black about. And look, Rob was Rob, and he was a hard-nosed kind of way about how he carried himself. So none of us got compliments too much. It was just the way it was. It was that was Rob, man, you know, and to each their own. But I don't know. I don't know. That again, that's a question you'd have to ask him. Um, I didn't look at it that way at the time. You know, we were just part of the show. But I guess looking back on that now, we were really the only uh, we were the only talent that was used in our capacity. We were announcers. We were used as announcers, but the wrestlers weren't being used as wrestlers. The referees weren't even on television. So I guess we were the only ones performing our roles at the time. And that was, as frustrating as that was, I guess you could say that Rivera and I benefited from that, because now the audience is really getting to know us more than ever before. So we were unintentionally uh, solidifying our roles and really getting the people to trust us, understand us, more time to showcase our banter and our comedy back and forth with one another. So at the time, it was frustrating that we didn't have wrestling, but looking back on it, that was a good time for Rivera and I, as far as getting over and not putting ourselves over, but just getting over organically, and also practicing. We were gelling the whole time, week after week. It was just this gelling that helped us gel with one another. So that was always great, and we were always on television, whether the wrestlers were or not.
See, I don't think you guys get enough credit for, you keeping basically the promotion afloat, whether you guys were just by circumstance put in that position, or what I think you guys had that chemistry, as you said, and that it factor that kept people interested to see what was going to happen in the upcoming months.
I mean, thank you. I mean, I appreciate that, and I'm sure if Rivera heard that, he would say thank you as well. That's means a lot, because we were both we were waving that flag, man. We were all in. We were Team XPW 100%, as if it was our league as well, on, let's say, on paper. But we were very passionate about keeping it alive, making sure that we came across talking to the fans how important everything is, whether it's Rocco and Jocko kicking a box and can't pick it up like on the Three Stooges. Like, did you see Jocko? Oh yeah, but what about Rocco? I mean, he almost, the box was right there, and then Jocko kicked it away. I can't believe it. These guys are a bunch of buffoons, and we're talking like this is so important, But we did, and that was the fun part too, because we're engulfed in this world. We're in this bubble. We're in this world, and this bubble is real when you're in it. And that was so fun to be a part of that. Also, too, Eric, kayfabe was still very much alive then. Maybe not as much as it was in the early 80s, but boy, compared to today, we were keeping kayfabe going.
Yeah.
Especially the first couple years of XPW. 2002 and 3, looking back, it was starting to fade away a little bit, because the shoot interviews were just the infancy of that. wasn't too widely viewed yet, the shoots, but that's when it kind of started. And you really felt the difference from like 99, 2000. 2001 was all right, but 02 and 03, you could really feel the difference of, like going out to the ring, feeling the energy of the fans. You could feel there was something like the air was starting to become deflated just in the general vibe of the fans. And I remember knowing that that was because, they're allowing the cat out of the bag a little too much in pro wrestling. And you could definitely gauge and feel that back then. 99 was very different from 2003 as far as that goes.
I'm going to ask you just a few names from XPW over the whole tenure. I'm going to ask you Damian Steele.
He had a lot of what we call the it factor. He was already, when we started, it was like, whoa, this guy is already looks like a wrestler, sounds like a wrestler, carries himself like a wrestler, and he understood. He looked like he carried himself like he was already made it to the WWE, let's say. And that kind of went a long way for that to be the first of the main guys, of the homegrown guys. You almost needed a guy like that was like, looked like, let's say, old school but modern at the same time, carrying the flag. Like when you saw him, when the fans first saw him, it's like, whoa, this is a guy that I should know about already, and this is a guy. Yeah, he wasn't he let's say he didn't look indie at all. So it was very important to have him in that role, feuding with Big Dick Dudley, the first major feud. So also is important that it wasn't Big Dick Dudley and, let's say, some other ECW legend. Very important looking back that we had our guy in that spot. And very, very professional in the back. Never had any problems with him. Nothing.
Gary Key, aka Tool.
Yeah, again, what a pro. What a great mind for the business. Excellent mind for the business. And legendary status as far as I'm concerned. And you can just, and what a good guy, man. Soft spoken, good dude.
Absolutely.
Yeah. He's the class act all the way.
Do you feel XPW truly dropped the ball with him?
Yeah. Especially when he was getting over, and then when they, nothing against Lou Cypher, but that was not neat. That was or when they changed his gimmick to kind of controversial neo-Nazi kind of thing, like Tool didn't need that, But what a great moment at the LA Sports Arena when the Black Army got cleared out by Sabu and Tool. And then, whoa, when they went face to face, you got to listen to that crowd pop. It was like really realizing at the time, holy crap, this Tool thing is over. We knew Sabu was over already. But to see the fans react to this guy, Tool, you really felt the power. Again, can't emphasize enough, the power of television. The crowd was like, couldn't wait to see that. Tool versus Sabu never happened. And Tool was a guy that can almost be like comparable to our version of The Undertaker. He was kind of like XPW's Undertaker. He wasn't the champ. He wasn't the big heel, but he was right there on top with everybody else in his own way. He was the type of guy that didn't really need the title, the championship, to be over the way he was, just like Undertaker, So yeah, Tool, big time ball drop with him, I feel, for sure.
And also somebody during that era that kept kayfabe the whole time. I don't think anyone ever saw him without the mask during that whole run.
Nope. And I remember too him driving in and out of the sports arena, a little bit of street clothes on, but the mask was on as somebody else, was driving. He was in the passenger seat, kept the mask on, and kind of like the stories of Santo, going in and out of the arena. And again, that's a great example of how how alive kayfabe still was.
Absolutely. I'm going to
Uh,
throw out a couple names to you. You just mentioned Sabu. I'm going to pair up Sabu and Josh Lazy together.
yeah, Sabu, of course. What can you say, man? He was major legend. So valuable to getting him in the company. So valuable to have him as the champion. Just another recipe item you can add to the legitimizing XPW. You know, you had the finances, you had the television, you had all that. Then now you have Sabu as your guy, as your champion. Boom, another check mark in the legitimacy category. So vital to have him. And you know, he was over. So not just in XPW, just period. And so yeah, very important to have him. And the whole thing with Lazy and him really worked. It just worked, you know. Lazy had his character and a kind of edgy guy in a band and all that, and it just worked with him and Sabu. And and it was their idea that they were defending the title all over the world. And that really legitimized things. You know, Sabu being in Mexico and Japan and Europe defending the XPW world title. Boy, that was a huge thing. The American fans didn't really know much about that TV wise, but that legitimized it in the eyes of people internationally and in the magazines and all that. So some of the fans probably knew of it, but you know, not to the point where you're seeing it all the time, because I guess we weren't allowed to use a lot of the footage for television. But um, huge advantage having him. Absolutely.
The Messiah.
Oh man, great guy. Um, you know, I remember him in the days of Slammers. You know, and uh, and then when he first came into XPW, it was kind of like the Owen Hart treatment with the blue blazer. It's like, we got some plans for you. We don't know what yet. So we're going to put you in a mask at first. And so he was the lunatic, and oddly enough, the same colors as the blue blazer. But you know, watching him go from what he did to where he became with Messiah so quickly was pretty impressive, you know. And then he really adopted that character big time and got over. And again, this was kind of XPW's edginess with, you know, using religion a little bit. It was kind of like, it was a little edgy at the time. Um, but yeah, great, man. As far as homegrown talent, very impressive. I mean, big time.
Are you surprised he never made it further as far as working for a big company, whether it be, you know, WWE, TNA, Impact, or any big promotion that was around in the early to mid 2000s?
Yeah, yeah, big time. And again, like a Damian Steele in a totally different way, he had the it factor. He had the look, he had the promo, and he had the wrestling, and he could do it all. He could have a technical match, and he wasn't afraid to mix it up with the best of them death match wise either. So yeah, he was one that you think, you know what, let's put it in the should have made it category for sure. Absolutely.
Kraken Angel.
Bah, crack. Let's see. Oh my gosh, man. Crack an angel. Talk about crack you up. My goodness, man. Just hilarious stuff. And Crack, oh, became a really good buddy of mine. Man, just hilarious stuff with them. And you, if you guys want to know one of the greatest stories, and I'll save this, but I'll make a plug here on Extreme Memories, my podcast that I did, and I interviewed almost everybody from the company's history. Go and check out the episode of the Crack and how he got into the business. One of the great stories of all time. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, awesome, man. Both those guys just the best, and just hilarious stuff. Stuff you brought, a lot of stuff you just couldn't do on TV anymore today.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true. But it was hilarious stuff for the time, and they were highly entertaining.
Oh, completely.
And if anyone's met Crack outside of the business, he's quite the character, just like he is on TV.
Exactly. Not much difference. Maybe with the sexual orientation, but other than that, not much difference from the character to real life.
Joey Styles.
Oh, like I said before, him and I became close. It was a little rocky when he first came in, and it really wasn't had nothing to do with him, but it was the direction of where they wanted to go with us as announcers. That ended pretty quickly once we started talking, and we had just had so much in common. We were like I was the West Coast version, and he was the East Coast version of each other. But getting into the business and announcing for two extreme leagues, we just had so much in common. And he was a great guy, and he actually got me a tryout for WWE. And can't thank him enough for that. And spent a lot of time talking about everything, family and how we grew up, um and the business itself. And so I paint him in a good light with a compliment. Absolutely.
I'm gonna end the name association with the franchise Shane Douglas.
Like Sabu, extremely important to have. Um, when he first came in and he was there cutting promos, wow, what a big deal that was at the time, and kind of involved with WCW. And when he was very intelligent as far as, I'm going to use that, just talk about WCW in XPW. It almost like you felt like XPW and WCW were on the same level, and that was done purposely. At the time, it didn't look like that. It looked like, I'm just going to talk shit about WCW, but the mindset was, let me do that, and it puts it on the same level. So things like that, Shane Douglas was very good at, to think outside the box, do some things that the fans don't see you doing, but it's really getting the job done. As far as he was all about the legitimization of XPW. Shane Douglas put this company on the map. That was all very real.
Now, was there ever talks to bring someone into XPW and it literally almost happened, but for some reason at the last split second, it just fell apart? For some reason, they didn't show up or some other type of
Well, um, I mean, Atsushi Onita was the big one, where we were going to do the first ever exploding ring death match in the United States, and doing it at that time would have been so much better too. But that was probably the biggest one. Gosh, I probably, some names are going to come back in my head. We were supposed to do work with Stampede Wrestling, which came back, and Bruce Hart attended. Was it Go Funk Yourself, one of the sports arena shows, and that never happened. So I can't, boy, when you're talking like this, probably some names are going to come back to my head that I'm just blanking on at the moment.
Was Scott Hall supposed to ever appear in XPW? Because I've heard some rumors about that.
I can't. I just not. That's not ringing a bell at the moment. It's almost like I can't remember that being a thing. But then as you're talking, it almost sounds vaguely familiar. So think that's another Kevin question. Yeah.
So when did you know? Because we were talking about, you really felt like when TV was getting going, you guys were running the LA Sports Arena, that things were at an all-time high. Go Funk Yourself. When did you kind of start seeing the wheels kind of fall off the tracks a bit?
I would say probably after money was drained after buying the old ECW arena, renaming it the XPW arena. I think once you kind of realize, you didn't really see the wheels falling off the tracks until pretty much the very end. That was a big blow. That was financially, I don't think that was necessary, and it put a dent in the pocketbook for sure. The adult film industry was starting to change. You know, I don't know if it was as profitable anymore with the old business model, and also too, um, you know, uh, all the controversy, and then when Rob went after the federal government, I think that was the big one. When we got raided, the office got raided, and even John Ashcroft's physical signature was on the paper to raid the XPW offices in the San Fernando Valley. And that was like, you were like, on one hand it's like, whoa, this is big news, this is great for us, but wait, well, maybe we're in over our head, maybe we can get taken down. And that was for sure the biggest sign of the wheels coming off the track. Absolutely.
Now, during the whole XPW tenure, during and after, UPW was on the other side of SoCal running, and they probably had the biggest presence next to XPW as far as a buzz going on. During
100%.
your tenure, during or after, did you ever have talks with Rick Bassman or UPW about joining?
No, I never did. Todd Kennelly, their announcer, and I became really good friends. Not till after this, but no. When we were doing XPW and they were doing UPW, it was like enemy territory, enemy territory. You know what I mean? Like, it was almost like an unwritten rule. We were not allowed to converse. You know, so um, no, never, never. That would never happen. And then my timeline personally, um, Rob did a thing called Catfight Wrestling, and he rented his ring out to a film producer by the name of Bill Osco. And I was in the office, and they were doing their own production, but they were paying Rob to rent the ring out in the warehouse and the cameras. Well, their announcer for that event was green, and she froze, so they threw me in there. I did it. It was funny, and the guy Bill Osco, who produced Night Patrol in the '80s, the Underachievers, Alice in Wonderland, and Flesh Gordon. That was the producer. Well, when we were done, he goes, "Hey, what's your name, Kris? Yeah, you saved me, man. This was one take, and I had to get it, and you really saved me. And I thought you were funny. I'm going to be doing stuff. I'd like to involve you." And so we got in touch with each other. He started his play, Alice in Wonderland, based off of his 1970s movie that grossed 90 million because he wanted to redo the movie, but he had to do the play first. So I was cast as the White Rabbit, and this was right at the time XPW was ending. And then as we were doing the plays, he said, "Hey, pack your bags. We're going to Broadway. We're taking the show to New York." So I was like, "Whoa, okay." And that was a big shift in my life at the time. Great opportunity. And I did that, and man, so that what I couldn't. The time couldn't have been more perfect because XPW closed shop. And then boom, I went to New York. So I was kind of like, my wrestling days were kind of, I said before, wrestling, my life, wrestling, this was when my life was taken over before getting kind of back into the business. So I lived out there for a year, did the show. And then that was in '03, '04. I came back when the show ended, finished college at CSUN. And then, that was it. So no, with XPW ending, that was kind of almost like, wow, the stars are aligned here, big time.
Absolutely.
Couldn't have planned it better, you know.
What was your experience like working for Bill Osco and also living in New York? And tell
Awesome.
people a lot about that, because a lot of people don't know that you were on and off Broadway play over there.
Yeah. And so what a great experience. And Bill was a cool guy, little bit of a Rob Black in his own right, went against the grain, and and again, he produced all these comedies. So a great comedic mind, man. And we got along as far as that goes. So a lot of fun, man. And after working for Rob in XPW, it was like that actually trains you to work with people that go against the grain, and it almost becomes a breeze because you had to pay your dues in XPW and eat crow and all that. So when other people tried to present themselves as hard edge, it's like, this is nothing, I already worked at extreme. So it prepared you. But no, Bill Osco was great. He was edgy, and I liked that. And it was like total freedom to do whatever you wanted as far as a character and be edgy in your role. So great experience, man. And we did 8 shows a week. We were dark on Wednesday, but we did 2 on Friday, 2 on Saturday, and 1 every other day but Wednesday of the week. So that was a grind. It was a graveyard schedule for sure, because you did the shows at night and you're up for a while. So which I loved, the graveyard. I'm a night owl. So yeah, we did that for about a year, and I lived out there, and man, so cool. And New York was still New York back then. It was still old New York in a lot of ways. So different today, unfortunately. But to experience that city, oh my gosh, there's nothing else. There's no other place like it in the world. I actually went to WrestleMania 20 when I was living out there, and so yeah, it was fantastic, and I was not really paying attention to the wrestling world at that time, so engulfed in my work at the time with the play. So that was that. Unfortunately, there were some investor issues, and the play never uh, became the movie. So when that ended, and I had some other opportunities I was doing, but once all that ended, I moved back, and then I decided to finish college, to go back to CSUN and get my degree.
Now, there you go. See it right there.
Yeah.
So during this time, you finishing up college and everything, did Wrestling Society X come during that time or after?
Right after I graduated in August of '05, and I can't remember if I got back in touch with Kevin right around that time. Gosh, the timelines, it's so hugged close together. But it was, again, I couldn't ask for the timing to be better. Um, couldn't ask for the timing to be better. Once I graduated college, boom, there were the talks were about Wrestling Society X and MTV getting a show, and Houston Curtis, I guess he owned XPW at that point. So I remember going into the office doing some VOs, and he'd already known my work, and we got along really well. And I remember we're going, hey, we're going to try out announcers, and it wasn't too shortly after that I got the phone call. Actually, when I was in Lancaster doing those indie shows that we were involved with GXW, and he called me and said, hey man, we're going to have you as the announcer. I'm like, oh man, thank you, this is awesome. And so that was, we're off to the races with that too now. So now I'm back in the wrestling world big time, because now we have a show coming up on MTV. So all that practice with I talked about when I first did XPW, I wish I had practice. Thank God I had that practice now, that experience with 4 years straight with XPW leading into Wrestling Society X. Oh my gosh, thank goodness I had that.
Tell us about that wild time during MTV's Wrestling Society X, and were you surprised that a couple of those guys went on to become, as of today, a couple of wrestling's biggest stars?
Yeah, that was a great time. That was like a time when oh man, when the business was changing quite a bit during that time. We talked about the shoot interviews. The shoot interviews were like really blowing up, and the wrestling world was in a major transition. But we didn't really notice it, us that were in the business working and doing all that. We were just so captivated and focused on our work. So when that happened, you knew that they got signed to do this MTV show, it was almost unbelievable. And so much of us had a lot of experience at that time. I can only speak for myself with XPW, but of course, you had pros like, X-Pac, New Jack, Chris Hamrick that were more than just XPW. They were doing all that they did. So this was really a professional production, and it was an honor to be put in that class with all the rest of those guys. I'm not really surprised that any of those guys made it on to become stars. I probably would have, if you asked me, thought more of the guys in that company would have made it beyond to become stars. And really, it could have been any one of those talents. There was so much talent on that roster. I mean, some of the in-ring work was just off the charts, and it really ahead of its time. And so was the production of the show and the idea of that show, just maybe almost too ahead of its time to really catch on. Because I think today's wrestling audience is like tailor made for what that show was about. I think maybe there was just too much old school mentality still in the air, maybe at the time for that to catch on when it did. It's just only a few years ahead of its time, if you ask me.
Absolutely, maybe about 5 years or so.
Yeah, probably.
Memories of working alongside Seth Rollins.
Uh, like everybody else in that company, everybody was professional with one another. Everybody really wanted this to work. It was a team-oriented atmosphere. Uh, a couple of the meetings prior, like Vampiro and a few other guys, that really had experience, really stressed, hey, we're not going to have any clicks here. No clicks allowed, kind of thing. So we all kind of got from the very beginning, okay, we gotta be team oriented, and we all, for the most part, wanted to be. You almost didn't have to tell us to do any of that, and so it was not anything that was needed to be stressed to us. So that was big time. So as far as these guys working with them, I didn't really get to know Seth Rollins any more or less than all the other guys that were working there. He was maybe at least with me, he was just very work focused, a little bit to himself, which a lot of guys were, and but yeah, respectful guy, a great talent, along with most of the roster that we worked with. A lot of great talent.
Now, just kind of thinking about this and us talking about Seth Rollins, you've worked with so many people over the years. Is there one particular person that you're like, wow, I'm truly shocked that that person never hit the pinnacle of this industry for whatever reason? And there's so many reasons that play into that, by the way.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that stands
Oh
out?
man. Oh jeez. Oh my gosh.
If you have
Oh
a couple and it makes it easier, you can name a couple.
yeah. I know Dynamite D left us too early, but his mindset, um, and just the way he was personally, I would say him. I could say Damian Steele. Going back to Billy Messiah. Put Chaos in there. Um, um, uh, I know he's pretty well known, but Cole Cabana, I could put him in there. Um, of course, Teddy Hart, right? I mean, wow, what a talent. Um, I could maybe list another dozen if you gave me some time, but yeah, there's so many, and you can almost argue for every guy on that roster for one reason or another. There's no reason why. I mean, there's only so many spots. Let's be honest. There's only so many spots in the world of wrestling. Like any sport or entertainment entity, you only have so many spots. So, I mean, I think that's probably reason number one why some of the guys didn't make it that you thought should have.
So what happened with Wrestling Society X at the end of the day?
Well, at the end of the day, what ended up happening was the network. It's like, talk about a necessary evil. It's like, so thankful to have this network, but like, they were also the downfall of the company. You ask anybody that was in those meetings, um, they stuck their nose into it to the point where it was a detriment. It was great to have them, but it wasn't great to have them because, if you remember the stories of NBC and Saturday Night's Main Event, when Dick Ebersol understood, hey, let these guys do their thing. We'll dress it up a little bit, make it look good for television, but ultimately let them do their thing. And that's what MTV just didn't completely do with us. And MTV was going through a transition midway through our season as it was airing. The network, when we were brought on board, there were shows like us and Scarred and a few others that were brought back to regain the male audience that network had lost, the Jackass audience that they had lost. So when we were doing that, there was a big overhaul with the company, MTV. They did away with half their roster, their production roster and all that business model, that they brought in people that wanted to go back to more of a female audience, the 16 and pregnant and all that. So that was the writing on the wall at the beginning. And then as that was happening, they kept sticking their nose into the production side of everything. They didn't know wrestling, and unfortunately that showed with a lot of the product. But at the end of the day too, they did things like they chose the Tuesday night time slot, which went against WWE ECW, and that was just by accident. Like, they just happened to put us in that time slot, like, whoa, we don't want to be here. No, that fits the MTV model. They weren't thinking outside other wrestling entities. So WWE took that as, oh my gosh, these guys are ballsy. They want to go head to head with us out the gate. And if you remember, our first show was aired against the time where Vince McMahon won the ECW title.
Yes,
And that was not by accident. That was because they took it as we were going up against them. But the reality was, that's where just MTV put us, so it fit their MTV television scheduling. So what a coincidence, right? But there was a little bit of buzz because of that. There was a little bit of buzz of like, whoa, these guys are going against, in the wrestling world. It created this buzz that we didn't even intend. We just wanted to be on TV. We did not want to go against anything. We wanted our product to get as many eyeballs as we could. So no, that was an innocent, honest mistake that was done unintentionally by the network.
Well, once that ended, obviously you had WWE's attention and you had a couple tryouts with them. Can you please fill us in about how all that came about and what that process was like?
Yeah, I really haven't talked about this much. And then when I'm kind of done here, Eric, if you don't mind, while I grab something, can you talk about our sponsor, Vape Siggy, for a second while I grab something?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. It was Joey Styles that I reached back out to, and I went ahead and I reached out to him about getting a tryout because he was working for the company at the time. Well, he said, okay, let me see what I can do. Boom, I get a call. Hey, come on up to Oakland. We're doing Raw and we're going to try you out. Okay. I had a couple days to do this. So I drove up there and did the tryout. It went very well. Worked with Steve Lombardi on that quite a bit. Very informative, very helpful. So it was kind of this makeshift tryout, and I was back there with everybody. Very cool experience. A couple of photographers did the shows at the Olympic for XPW, recognized me, and we were talking. Say, hey, good luck. We did that. Joey said, hey, very good job. Well, they'll be in touch with you. They may want to do an official tryout. So a few months later, I get the call, hey, we're going to fly you out to Stanford. So it's like, okay, wow, great. And get ready. So I went out there, did the tryout, limo, the whole 9 yards, picked me up.
Just like all the stars from the 80s and 90s were basically.
Yeah, it was just that alone was so impressive. First class, everything, man. And so did the tryout. I felt very good about it, really good about it. I worked with John Gaburik. He was watching. We went into the studio. I did the play-by-play. I did a promo, and then I had to think of any product in your head that's WWE related and sell it to me. And so what did I do? I did like, hey, do you want to impersonate your favorite WWE stars? And I did a Macho Man. I did a Howard Finkel. Yeah, call and get this tape right now. And then they really liked that a lot. So I did the play-by-play. I did the interviewing a guy, and I did a bumper promo, and then I did the sell that product. And I liked it. It was good. So this is when they were bringing Sean Mooney back, if you remember. They had 11 guys. Joey was telling me this as it was going. They had 11 guys that they tried out, including Sean Mooney. Well, it came down to myself and Sean Mooney were the last two guys. And then I just never heard anything because he eventually told me, you are, sometimes they do these tryouts as a formality. That just to say they're trying guys out, but they're going to stay with the status quo. They're going to stay with Cole and Lawler at that time. And so it's a little unfortunate. I did get told like, oh, Kris, your height hurts you because you're so tall. And it's like, oh, come on. Like there's tall guys that do it now. Right. But that was just what he said at the time. It doesn't mean that you're out of the loop. But as far as right now, they're going to stay with their status quo. But man, I can't tell you, they were all so nice and very like, look, we were really impressed. Unfortunately, that's where it's at right now. They're not going to hire anybody new. And then about a year later, Sean Mooney did get hired back to do like not the live stuff, but the the WWE Network 24/7 deal for some things. But I can't thank Joey enough for that. And yeah, good guy. Still keep in touch here and there with him to this day. But he's kind of out of the business now. But yeah, no, I don't really talk about that. But what a great experience, going back there.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'll let you take it from here. But now to our sponsor. Thank you. Be right back.
Ladies and gentlemen, anybody for their vaping needs, either that or if you need any CBD products, please, if you're in the Los Angeles area, hit up our good friend Steve over at Vape Siggy. He's located at 22209 Sherman Way in Canoga Park, California. And please be sure to tell him that the Wrestling with Reality podcast, Eric Malikian and Kris Kloss send him your way, and I know he will hook you up with a 10% discount. Now, anybody watching this live stream or going to watch this podcast later, please let us know in the comment section below who you would like to see as a future guest, or if you have any questions today so I could ask Kris Kloss before we wrap things up, I will make sure to ask him because we definitely want to keep our viewers happy. Hi, Mark Mancini. How you doing? Thank you for watching. This has been a great interview. I think we'll go another few more minutes. We're going to wrap up. And wow, we're over an hour and a half in. So many things to cover with Kris still, but I'm going to try to just ask the important stuff and then you will maybe do a part 2 down the road.
Part 2, all right.
Yeah. So got the plugs done. We also, I gave a shout out anybody who's, whether they're listening right now or watching right now the live stream or going to watch the video later. I basically asked them, hey, who would they like to see as a future guest on the podcast, or if they got any questions, basically throw them our way before we end this podcast, and I'll ask. I did get one, so I will ask it right now. What happened with your latest run in XPW?
So when XPW came back, Rob reached out to me, reached out to a few other guys, and I'm currently a charity auctioneer. So I was kind of trying to fit that with my schedule because usually charity auctions are on the weekend. We kind of work something out. But as it was going, it just came up to a simple disagreement, how things were handled, and I just decided to go my own separate way. And for the time being, I mean, I did like going back. It had a big time feel, and that was kind of cool to kind of have that again. Uh, but it's not always rosy in the back as much as you'd like it to be. So we just had a disagreement and decided to go away at the time. And in wrestling, never say never. That's just where we're at now. So who knows? But I'm happy for everybody that's there. I wish them all the best. And it is kind of cool. It was when it first came back, and it's just like, oh, this is kind of interesting. It really was. And now that I see a lot of the guys from back in the day, especially, I wish them all the best, man. And XPW in general.
Ryan Moreno actually threw a question our way. He wants to know your thoughts on Brett Lauderdale and Game Changer Wrestling.
I think it's great that there's such a buzz now with the world of wrestling as far as this kind of product is concerned. And I think GCW, XPW coming back, and everything else going on right now is a good little kick in the butt for this industry. Also, the edginess, like in the last few years, we kind of completely came back to this PG vibe, and it just got a little stale to the point where almost people are afraid to be edgy in any way. So any product like this that's coming around at a time when people are really have a longing and a hunger for this raw realism is always good. And so I'm glad that this is around, and again, kind of giving the industry a little kick in the butt that it needs right now. So it doesn't get caught up with this, let's make everybody feel good and not do what wrestling's all about, which is ridiculous, at times very edgy, controversial stuff that makes you want to hate a heel, let's say, kind of atmosphere. So I like that there's a buzz right now, and it's pretty strong. It's nice.
Absolutely. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, they're running a double shot almost every weekend across the country, which is, a kind of a feat in itself.
It really is, man. And I don't know, like if you would have said 5-6 years ago that this was going to happen, you probably wouldn't have believed it. You know what I mean? Again, we're the stalemate that the business was in. And so no, very good, very cool. And again, man, I can't wish these guys the best enough. So very, very good stuff. Wrestling needs that right now.
Who knows? Maybe one day we will see you at Game Changer Wrestling.
And you know what? Like I say, anything's possible in this business. Is one thing that I've learned, man. Anything is possible.
So where we picked up, Wrestling Society X had left off. You had, a couple tryout experiences with WWE. Now, I'm going to throw something your way. You said when you were backstage and you did a couple pre-takes over backstage at one of the TV tapings that Steve Lombardi, the Brooklyn Brawler, gave you some good advice and he helped you out. Would you like to share your experiences, meeting Steve Lombardi and just how some of the staff treated you back there?
Treated me great, extremely professional. It was just little things like, you know, think about your eye contact with the camera when you want to accentuate that more and less than other times. And they were very complimentary. Like, look, obviously you've done this before. We don't have to tell you much, but we're going to tell you little things here and there. And the one thing I remember him saying um, was, "It's not the wrestling business. Don't say business. It's the wrestling industry. Remember, industry." I was like, "Oh, wow, okay, yeah. We don't say the wrestling business. We say this industry." And I was like, I really remembered that, and that was like during the promos of hey, tell the camera why you should be the announcer. And I'd say, I worked in the business. No, the industry. So I never forgot that. And then, and little things, again, your mark, things like that. And your eyes go a long way, your eyes, like acting, your eyes go a long way. So I thought that was cool, but again, very complimentary. Certain things that you had to learn, but they were very cool with as far as like, well, look, we don't have to tell you much, but we are going to tell you little things here and there. So again, I'm ready to pay my dues in this company, even though I've done so in the business, but respected that, I haven't worked here yet, so I'm ready to pay my dues here. But I'm going to also bring my experience to the table. And so just kind of learning how, even though the business, you really figure out like, wow, there's so many different little things about each company you have to learn and understand and grow with. So uh, very cool, very cool, and again, very respectful, very professional.
And after that, not too long after that, there was a buzz going around that in Las Vegas, the classic wrestling revolution was going to take off. Can you tell us a little bit about that and just kind of the whole story behind that, and maybe where maybe they just decided for now at least to put it on the back burner?
Well, yeah, that was one of those questions from before when you kind of asked of anybody you worked in the business, who did you think would make it? And then I'll kind of turn that question around, like, of all the people I worked with in the business, what were some of the most in awe? Like, I can't believe I'm working with them. And boy, maybe number one is Roddy Piper. It was such a short little window, but man, we had it was I was on play by play, he was on color commentary, and that was going to be the hosts of this show. Couldn't believe it. Of all the things I've done, MTV or XPW and all these super shows that we've done, like the one that we did in San Francisco, and all these legends that we worked with, it's like I still like, wow, something else is happening that I just can't believe is happening. And so I got approached by Bill Townsend and Cristo Garcia. Cristo Garcia was a television producer for the Golf Network and other projects and networks he worked for. Bill Townsend, still remain close with him too, good friends. He was one of the guys that started LinkedIn and Lycos. So this guy was up there as far as, Silicon Valley entrepreneur. Yeah, and so he now wanted to get into the wrestling business, knew of me, knew my work, was a fan, and we were off to the races, and we were going to create what was the CWR, the Classic Wrestling Revolution. Shane Douglas, we reunited, we were back in touch with each other, and we all met at the Airtel Hotel, where XPW just did its shows, and where we had the Onita Sabu press conference. What a stroke of coincidence that was. We all met there, and like, are you kidding me? Like, this is where we're meeting. And so we did a couple promos, myself, Shane Douglas, and Roddy Piper was there. Road Warrior Animal was involved, and so we were getting everything in motion. And we did the pilot episode we did was up in Point Hueneme. It was using the NWA's television that was already set up, kind of the way Bill Osco used XPW's facilities that were already set up for his project. So we came in there, we did our pilot episode in the middle of their NWA taping, and Colt Toombs, Roddy Piper's kid, Rocky Romero, and there were a few other matches. That match is actually on YouTube. It's the rough cut. It's Colt Toombs, Rocky Romero, CWR, Classic Wrestling Revolution, and that's the one match that survived with myself and Roddy Piper on commentary. So it is up there on YouTube. Maybe we'll
try to later link the match onto this interview.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's one of something I'm very proud of, and again, what an honor working with Roddy Piper. And boy, I was blown away when we stopped. He was, whoa, you know, I don't know if he knew who I was, but he was like, wow, you know, you're good. And I'm like, oh, what? You're saying this? Like, what? No, man, you're the freaking legend of all legends, you know? And what a guy, what a regular guy he was. You know, you could just tell, like, this guy never let his fame get to his head. And never forgot where he came from, kind of vibes I got from him. Great family, got to meet all of them, not just Colt, but the wife, the sisters, and you know, it was just what a great guy, family man, and so unfortunate and tragic that only weeks later he ended up passing away. And we did the pilot and didn't really know where we were going at that time. One of the investors ended up passing away with Bill Townsend. We ended up signing China. She passed away. I mean, what was happening here? You know, we're all so excited for this on one hand, but all this stuff is happening. And then, so at that point, we met up. Christo and I went to go see Jake Roberts' one-man show in Burbank, and that was when they decided to get Jake Roberts to fill the spot of Roddy Piper. And so there's some pictures I can put up of our meeting with Jake Roberts and Christo. And I just think one thing led to another. And, you know, I think the biggest blow, obviously, was Roddy Piper dying, China too. But those investors that passed away was business-wise, that was maybe the biggest blow to the company. And, you know, there was a facility in Vegas we talked about that was already purchased. I mean, everything was in motion, and man, what a bummer that we never got to see how that league would have unfolded, because there was health insurance. And I have to tell you that this model, it was, if you look at it, it was almost verbatim adopted by AEW. You know, this was supposed to be a totally different direction business-wise, and how they took care of the talent in professional wrestling, which was a big reason why Roddy Piper was on board. He didn't necessarily want Colt going into the WWE. He wanted there to be this alternative that was at that same level as WWE. So he was the guy that was going to really spearhead this and believed in it. And you know, if you watch Roddy Piper's tribute after he died on Raw, there's something there that you could see they weren't giving him, I don't think, the tribute that they really should have gave him, because there was some bad blood at the time of his death with him in WWE. Dusty Rhodes, a few months before that, was given bigger treatment, you know, and so you could kind of tell, if you knew what was going on, you could kind of see, like, okay, they got to say something with the tribute, but they could have said a little more. And I think it was because there was definitely business-wise, there was stuff going on. I heard it firsthand from Roddy Piper. He was so excited. I was like, man, I want my son to do this. I don't want him to get trapped in all of the certain things I got trapped in with WWE. So boy, did Roddy Piper believe and was excited for this product. a big bummer that we never got to see it roll out and unfold. Because even I'm just as a fan, I'm kind of curious. Wow, what would have happened with Classic Wrestling Revolution? You know, and talk about having major advantages with Bill Townsend at the head.
Having said all that, is there a possibility that we will see you in either WWE or AEW sometime in the future?
I mean, I'll just go back to never say never, and anything is possible. I can't I don't have the crystal ball in front of me to give you that specific answer, but yeah, I'm still doing stuff. You know, I still do shows out in the South. Periodically, I get flown in. I'm doing stuff locally with MPW, Millennium Pro Wrestling. Um, I just want to keep. I love it. I love the business, and I like to keep rust from building up and something to do. It is secondary to my true work right now, which is a charity auctioneer. I raise money for a lot of needy nonprofits around the globe, and it's a very rewarding work. And I have to keep doing that as far as my real work goes. And it's and I'm back on the microphone, which is kind of cool. You know, it yeah. And so yeah, it's yeah, I never say never with that. I'm still keeping my feet wet as far as announcing, and there's not just ring rust, but there's mic rust too, and I've experienced that before for sure.
Well, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but I know there's countless other people that feel the same way, that you should be in a major company. I mean, you have the it factor, you have the experience, you have the following of people that are fans of yours. And I think, WWE or AEW is really missing the boat by not giving you a spot.
Well, all I can say is thank you very much, Eric, for saying that. And like you said, if there's anyone else out there that shares those sentiments, like you said, then thank you guys very much. And yeah, there are a few occasions like at reunion shows and all that, especially like when Rivera and I got together, where we'd walk out and everyone, before we even said anything, was clap, clap, clap. And so there are some great moments where I feel very blessed to have a lot of people really care about me and give me those accolades. I can't tell you how humbled I am. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And you talking about basically like how you said your time with XPW came to an end. And I'm going to ask you kind of a deep question here that I think is good for maybe a young wrestler or someone breaking in the business. As you get older, it's like, as great as we think pro wrestling is and you want to be a part of the business, the end. Correct.
Okay, I missed the second part. It got frozen there, but the question.
Basically, because we are the Wrestling with Reality podcast here, we talk about, the business, and then, but also how our life outside of the business is even more important. Would you like to share with maybe young, hopeful wrestlers or people aspiring to be in the business as you get older and like you have a budding career now doing nonprofit auctions? Do you think there's a time when maybe your focus should be on what's making you money and what's going to provide for your family?
I mean, absolutely. If you have the ability to put some time aside to follow your dream, I can't emphasize enough that if you have a dream, follow it. Um, though it's not as simple as that. If you have a dream, follow it. At the same time, just yeah, unfortunately, we can't always put all of our eggs in the same basket. Um, if you have an opportunity, I just got to say go for it, because you will very likely, it's very easy to regret certain things that you always going to be in the back of your brain. What if, coulda, woulda, shoulda. Um, again, not so black and white, not so cut and dry, because at the very same time, um, you do have to do what's right for you, for your family, for your well-being. But boy, if you can balance that and you can put some time aside to follow your dream, you can do it. If you really want it, you can do it. You take care of priority A, which is whatever's putting food on the table. But at the same time, if you really want to grind it out, I remember like with XPW, I would be going to school, but man, we would do television and once a week, and then I'd have to come back in and do certain things to fix things, and then our live shows and leading up to it. Those were the graveyard nights. Whenever you see Rivera and I on XPW TV, that's probably 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. We're taping all those. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock on a Wednesday. So we drive home and the sun was coming up. And we just grinded it out. And you can do that, but it's going to take some dedication. It's going to take some hard work and some sacrifices. I was trying my best at the time to keep my priorities straight while also following those dreams. You can do them both, but they're going to be grinds like that. There's going to be some sacrifices where you're not going to get a lot of sleep, where you're going to have to do things that are going to affect your day-to-day life. But I would just say, if you can balance them both, go for it. Absolutely.
Before I ask you the final question and before I give you plugs, one name totally escaped me that I should have asked you about: Larry Rivera.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, man, my homie and my tag team partner, and man, what fun we had, man. We just had so much fun, and when we gelled. When I interviewed him for Extreme Memories, that was the first time anybody had seen us out of character ever. And that was kind of mind-blowing just for us, that we were used to each other in real life, of course, but we were just like, wow, we're actually being ourselves for the first time on camera here. And the way we would talk about getting excited for doing certain things in the banter, now we finally got to share that with everybody else, is how we really were together. And so on Extreme Memories, that was one of my favorite interviews for sure, was the one with Larry Rivera on the Wrestling Chatter YouTube channel. So I mean, so much fun. I mean, it's just so great, such a joy to work with. And it made what was already fun working in professional wrestling, it made it just that much more fun. Just going on the mic and being a Bobby Heenan, Gorilla Monsoon in our own way, the heel, the baby face, and just fun stuff. And the broken English and the not understanding and all this, just ridiculous stuff. Running with it, not scripted, and then knowing that we're going to get our job done, we're going to do our shtick within the confines of what we're supposed to be doing, was putting that product over on the screen.
Absolutely. Is there maybe one more time you and Rivera will call a show together sometime in the future?
Once again, never say never. Going back to that again, and who knows? That would be great. I think we would both like that and enjoy that. And who knows when that opportunity will come up? I think we would both jump on it for sure.
Absolutely, and I know a lot of people out there would like to see that as well.
Thank you.
So, Kris, leading into your plugs here right now, please tell us about KMK Auctions, some of the charity work you do, what organizations you've worked with, and what celebrities you've worked alongside.
Yep. So nonprofit charity auctions are out there to raise money, awareness for any and all causes that need it, whether it's school, whether youth programs, whether adoption programs, whether anything that is out there to help families, help the elderly, from Kids Save to the Boys and Girls Club, um, to just about anything, mendingkids.org. And that was done with Gene Simmons, the whole band Kiss. That was an honor. And we can put a link in the description of that demo Jay Leno, William Shatner, Sharon Stone, LL Cool J. Oh my gosh. Eli and Peyton Manning, Ice Cube. I'm going to leave some out, but the list goes on and on. And what an honor to be able to share the stage with some of these celebrities to raise money for worthwhile causes. If anybody out there is involved with a nonprofit, and you want to fundraise and you want to raise donations, money, awareness, charity, that is what I'm doing now. And I'm very proud to do that. And it's very humbling work. And it's like very rewarding, to know that you were a part of helping out a worthwhile cause. So that is what I'm doing now. And I'm proud to do it. And I'm back on the mic. And I can't stress enough how rewarding that type of work is. So hit me up on my Facebook Instant Messenger if you want to get a hold of me. If you are involved with, or that if you know anyone else involved with any nonprofit or any charity, a school, what have you, that wants to raise money and have a fundraiser, charity auction, hit me up on Kris Kloss Facebook Instant Messenger.
And if anybody wants to book for a wrestling gig, how would people go about doing that?
Same. Facebook Instant Messenger. I guess I can put my email address out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Kris Kloss, the number 1 at AOL.com. KRISKLOSS 1 at AOL.com. And hit me up, email me, and if you have a booking, let me know. And if it fits my schedule, I'll hopefully be able to work it out and do business with you. And I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kris. It's always a pleasure talking to you or doing this podcast with you. You're a great friend. You're a consummate professional and even a better person. And that goes farther than anything else in this life.
Wow. Thank you, brother. Thank you, buddy. And right back to you, man. For those that are just getting to know you, Eric, I can't say enough of the same for you. Thank you very much, man. This was a blast. This was fun going down memory lane here on the Wrestling with Reality podcast, and nice to be in the guest spot for once.
It's truly my pleasure, Kris. Also, I'd like to give our sponsor one more quick plug, Vape Siggy. Please contact them. The owner, Steve, will hook you up if you mention the Wrestling with Reality podcast and either Eric Malikian or Kris Kloss. I know he will hook you up with a discount for any of your vaping and CBD needs.
And that's in Canoga Park on Sherman Way.
Yes, 22209 Sherman Way in Canoga Park.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve.
You so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Eric. This was a blast, and thank you all the fans for tuning in and going down this memory lane road with me. It's a lot of fun, and just a joy to go down this road that I've shared with so many of the fans throughout the years of being that guy that you always were annoyed with watching every week. So thank you.
Hey, and you know what? The best is yet to come, they always say.
Hey, coining Klaus Main and the Scorpions, the best is yet to come.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kris. And thank you, everybody, for listening to the Wrestling with Reality podcast. Take care.